The stars had always called to humanity. For hundreds of years, they looked up at the night sky and wondered what waited for them out there. Now, in the year 2247, they finally had their answer. Captain Ji-hoon Park stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, watching the swirling colors of faster-than-light travel fade away. His ship was the first human vessel to leave their home solar system. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations with quiet excitement. They had done it. They had broken the final barrier. "We're through, Captain," said Mina Lee from the pilot's seat. She was young, only 28, but she was the best pilot Earth had ever trained. "All systems are stable. We're in the Alpha Centauri system." Ji-hoon allowed himself a small smile. "Good work, everyone. Hyun, run a full diagnostic on the drive systems. I want to make sure everything is perfect before we push further." Hyun Kim, the chief engineer, nodded from his station. He was a careful man who never took risks with the ship's systems. "Already on it, Captain. The quantum drive looks good, better than the simulations predicted." Yuna Choi, the ship's xenobiologist, looked up from her screens with wide eyes. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange. There are energy signatures all around us. Dozens of them. These aren't natural." Ji-hoon felt his heart beat faster. "Artificial?" "Yes, sir. Very artificial. And they're old. Some of these readings suggest technology far beyond what we have." Yuna's fingers moved quickly across her controls. "Captain, I think we're not alone out here." The bridge went silent. Every person had dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, fear mixed with excitement. Were they friendly? Hostile? Would they even care about humanity? "Incoming transmission," said Mina, her voice tight with tension. "It's not in any language we know, but the computer is detecting patterns. It's trying to decode it." Ji-hoon straightened his uniform. "Put it on screen when ready." The main viewer flickered to life. Standing before them was a creature that looked nothing like a human. It stood upright on two legs, but its skin was covered in scales that shimmered green and gold. Its eyes were large and yellow, with vertical slits for pupils. When it spoke, sharp teeth filled its mouth. "I am Ambassador Trelvik of the Saltharian Dominion," the creature said. The translation came through slightly delayed, making its words seem strange. "You are the species called humans, yes? We have been monitoring your primitive radio signals for some time. We knew you would eventually stumble into real space." Ji-hoon kept his face calm, though the word primitive stung. "I am Captain Ji-hoon Park of Earth. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship with other civilizations." Trelvik made a sound that might have been laughter. "How quaint. You used the old words, peace and friendship." The ambassador's expression became serious. "Listen carefully, human. You have entered territory controlled by the Galactic Collective. We are an alliance of 417 species, all bound by ancient laws. Your species is now classified as juvenile. Do you understand what this means?" "We're new to space travel," Ji-hoon said carefully. "But we're quick learners. We'd like to join your collective as equals." This time Trelvik definitely laughed. The sound was harsh and mocking. "Equals, no. You misunderstand how the galaxy works, little human. The collective is organized by a simple principle. The strong rule, the weak serve. Your species has barely left your home system. You have no military power, no advanced technology, no allies. You are at the bottom, and that is where you will stay." Ji-hoon felt anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. "What exactly are you saying, Ambassador?" "I am saying that humanity will submit to collective authority. You will surrender all weapons. You will allow our ships to patrol your space. You will pay tribute in resources and technology, and you will be grateful for our protection." Trelvik leaned closer to the screen. "This is not a negotiation. This is how things are. Every species goes through this. In time, perhaps in a few thousand years, you may earn a higher status. But for now, you are nothing." Behind Ji-hoon, he heard Hyun's sharp intake of breath. Mina's hands tightened on her controls. Yuna stared at the screen in disbelief. "And if we refuse?" Ji-hoon asked quietly. Trelvik's smile grew wider. "Then we will quarantine your system. No ships in, no ships out. Your species will die slowly, trapped on your little worlds, never knowing what lies beyond. Or if you become troublesome, we will simply remove you. It has been done before to species who could not accept their place." The ambassador's image moved to the side, and a star map appeared. "You have 30 of your Earth days to decide. Send your answer to these coordinates. But know this, Captain Ji-hoon Park of Earth. Every species makes the same choice. They all submit. There is no other option. The collective has stood for millions of years. We have weapons that can destroy stars. We have fleets that number in the millions. What do you have? A few hundred ships that barely work? The transmission ended abruptly. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Captain? Mina's voice was small. What do we do? Ji-hoon stared at the empty screen. His mind raced through possibilities, through Earth's history of conflict and conquest. Humans had faced tyrants before. They had faced impossible odds. Sometimes they lost, but sometimes they won. We go home, he said finally. We report everything we've learned, and then we let Earth's government decide. They'll want us to submit, Hyun said bitterly. What choice do we have? He was right about one thing. We can't fight them. Maybe not, Ji-hoon said, but we don't have to accept slavery either. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Ji-hoon spent most of that time writing his report, choosing every word carefully. He knew that what he wrote would shape humanity's future. When they finally emerged back in their home system, a fleet of military ships was waiting to escort them. The news of first contact had already spread. The entire human race was watching, waiting to learn what was out there in the dark. The truth was harder than anyone had imagined. They were not alone, but they were also not welcome. Ji-hoon stood before the United Earth Council, the governing body that spoke for all of humanity. Politicians from every nation watched him with anxious faces. He told them everything, leaving nothing out. When he finished, the room erupted in argument. Some wanted to submit immediately. They said that survival was more important than pride. Others wanted to fight regardless of the cost. They said that freedom was more important than safety. The debates raged for weeks. Meanwhile, collective ships began appearing at the edge of human space, watching and waiting. They were patient. They had done this hundreds of times before. They knew how it always ended. But Ji-hoon remembered something his grandmother had once told him. She had lived through difficult times on Earth, through wars and disasters. She had always said that humans were survivors. They adapted, they endured, and they never stopped fighting for what they believed was right, even when the odds were impossible. As he watched the debates, Ji-hoon wondered if the Galactic Collective really understood what they were dealing with. They saw humans as primitive and weak. They saw them as just another species to dominate, but they had never met a species that had spent its entire existence fighting. They had never met a species that saw impossible odds as just another challenge. They had never met humans. The 30 days were almost up. Soon Earth would have to give its answer, and whatever that answer was, Ji-hoon knew that the galaxy would never be the same again. The stars had called to humanity, and humanity had answered. Now they would learn what price that answer demanded. The debates on Earth continued with no clear answer. Some governments wanted peace at any cost. Others refused to bow to alien threats. While humanity argued with itself, the Galactic Collective grew impatient. On Titan Station, one of humanity's largest mining colonies orbiting Saturn's moon, life continued as normal. The station housed 10,000 people who worked extracting valuable minerals from Titan's surface. They knew about the aliens, of course. Everyone did. But out here, so far from Earth, the political debate seemed distant and unimportant. Sunho Kang stood in the colony's main control room, watching the mining robots work below. He was a supervisor, responsible for keeping operations running smoothly. His sister Jiwoo worked in communications, maintaining contact with Earth and the other colonies. Another day, another ton of minerals, Sunho said to his co-worker, trying to sound cheerful, but he felt uneasy. For the past week, strange ships had been spotted near Saturn's orbit. They didn't respond to hails and didn't come close enough to be identified clearly. Jiwoo's voice crackled over his radio. Sunho, we've got a problem. Long-range sensors just picked up multiple contacts entering Saturn's space. They're big and they're not ours. Sunho's stomach dropped. How big? Capital ship size. At least 20 of them. And they're heading straight for Titan. Her voice was tight with fear. Sunho, I'm trying to contact Earth, but something's jamming our communications. Before Sunho could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed in every corridor. The mining robots on the surface suddenly shut down, their controls no longer responding. All personnel, this is Governor Tae-il-han, a voice announced over the intercom. We have incoming alien vessels. They have not identified themselves. Everyone is to proceed to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Sunho ran toward the communications center where Jiwoo worked. The corridors were filled with frightened people, many of them families with children. He pushed through the crowd, his heart pounding. He found Jiwoo at her station, her fingers flying across the controls. "I can't break through the jamming," she said frantically. "Earth doesn't know what's happening here." Through the large viewing window, they could see the alien ships approaching. They were massive, dark vessels that looked more like insects than machines. Their surfaces were covered in strange, organic-looking armor that seemed to shift and move. The lead ship positioned itself directly above the station. A beam of light shot down and suddenly gravity reversed. People screamed as they were pulled toward the ceiling. Sunho grabbed onto a railing, pulling Jiwoo close to him. Then just as suddenly, gravity returned. People fell, many of them injured. Before anyone could recover, parts of the station's outer wall simply dissolved as if melting away. Alien soldiers poured through the openings. They were insectoid creatures standing on 4 legs with 2 arms that ended in sharp claws. Their bodies were covered in black chitin armor, and they moved with frightening speed. Their eyes glowed a sickly green color. "Humans." One of them spoke through a translator device. "You will comply. Resistance is death." Governor Tail stepped forward, his hands raised. "We are not armed. We are a mining colony. Please, there are children here." The alien commander, its body larger and more decorated than the others, clicked its mandibles together. "I am War Commander Drek of the Vrin species. Your pathetic pleas mean nothing. The collective gave you time to submit. You wasted it with your debates and arguments. Now we take what we want." "We haven't decided yet," Governor Tail said desperately. "The 30 days aren't up. You said we had 30 days. And you should have used them wisely." Drek gestured with one claw, and soldiers began grabbing people, dragging them toward the breached walls. "You will all be processed and evaluated. Some will become workers. Others will be studied. Your minerals will be seized. Your station will become a collective outpost." A woman screamed as soldiers pulled her child away from her. She tried to fight back, but a soldier struck her and she fell silent. Something snapped inside Sunho. He had always been a peaceful man, someone who avoided conflict. But seeing these creatures hurt his people, terrorize children, and treat humans like animals awakened something primal in him. He grabbed a metal pipe from a broken railing and swung it at the nearest soldier. The creature turned, surprised, and the pipe cracked against its armored head. The alien stumbled but didn't fall. "Run!" Sunho shouted to the people around him. "Get to the escape pods!" Several soldiers surrounded him. Sunho knew he couldn't win, but he could buy time. He swung the pipe again, forcing them back. Other colonists, inspired by his bravery, began to fight back with whatever they could find. The station erupted into chaos. The Vrin had expected complete submission. Like every other species they had conquered, they were unprepared for resistance even from unarmed civilians. Commander Drek watched the fighting with what might have been amusement. "Foolish," it said. "Your species has spirit, I will grant you that. But spirit dies quickly when faced with superior power." Drek raised one claw, and an energy weapon appeared in its grip. It aimed at Sunho. "No," Jiwoo screamed. She threw herself between her brother and the commander. The energy blast hit her in the chest. She collapsed, smoke rising from the wound. Sunho caught her, his hands shaking. "Jiwoo, no, no, no," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Her eyes were open but unfocused. She tried to speak but couldn't. "This is what happens," Drek said coldly. "This is what always happens. The weak die. The strong survive. Accept your place, human." Sunho laid his sister down gently. He stood up, the metal pipe still in his hand, and looked at Commander Drek with pure hatred. "You made a mistake," he said quietly. "What mistake?" Drek laughed. "You are beaten. Your sister is dead. Your people are ours. You made us angry." Sunho's voice was steady despite his tears. "You'll learn why that's a mistake." Drek struck Sunho down with a casual backhand. As Sunho fell, consciousness fading, he saw something that gave him hope. In the confusion, Jiwoo had managed to trigger an emergency protocol before she died. A small light blinked on her console. The message was being sent through a backup system that the jamming hadn't caught. Earth would know. Earth would learn what the collective had done. The Vrin soldiers rounded up the surviving colonists and began dragging them toward their ships. They took everything of value from the station, stripping it bare. They left only destruction behind. The message from Titan Station took 6 hours to reach Earth. When it did, everything changed. Captain Ji-hoon Park was in a meeting with Admiral Taeyang Song when the news broke. They watched the footage that Ji-woo had managed to transmit before her death. They saw the attack. They saw the murders. They saw Sunho's last stand. The entire planet watched the same footage. Every news station played it on repeat. People who had argued for submission fell silent. People who had wanted peace saw what peace with the collective really meant. Admiral Taeyang was an old man who had spent 50 years in Earth's space navy. He had fought in the colony wars and the resource conflicts. He had seen combat and death. But watching that footage, seeing civilians gunned down for the crime of being in the wrong place made his blood boil. "They attacked us," he said quietly. "Before the 30 days were up. They attacked a civilian target. They wanted to send a message," Ji-hoon replied. "They wanted to show us we have no choice. They sent a message, all right." Taeyang stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Earth below. "They showed us exactly what submission means. They showed us what our future looks like if we bow to them. Admiral, our fleet can't match theirs. The intelligence reports are clear. They have millions of ships. We have hundreds. I know the odds, Captain." Taeyang turned back to face him. "But I also know that sometimes you have to fight even when the odds are impossible. Because some things are worth more than survival. Freedom is worth more than survival." Within hours, Earth's government made its decision. There would be no submission. There would be no tribute. Humanity would stand and fight regardless of the cost. The Vryn fleet, still occupying the space around Saturn, received Earth's response. Commander Drek read it with his soldiers and laughed. They choose extinction. How predictable and yet how foolish. He ordered his fleet to advance toward Earth. They would crush this resistance quickly, then move on to the next assignment. Humanity would become just another footnote in collective history, another species that learned too late the price of defiance. But as the Vryn fleet moved through space, they had no idea what they had awakened. They had studied human technology and found it primitive. They had analyzed human military capacity and found it laughable. They had evaluated human potential and found it limited. What they had not studied, what they could not understand, was the human spirit. They had not learned that humans were a species born in conflict, shaped by struggle, and hardened by millennia of warfare against their own kind. They had not learned that when backed into a corner, humans did not surrender. They fought. And they fought with a creativity and desperation that no peaceful species could match. The Vryn were about to learn these lessons. And the tuition would be paid in blood. Admiral Taeyang Song stood in the command center of Earth's Defense Fleet headquarters, staring at the tactical display. Red markers showed the Vryn fleet advancing from Saturn toward Earth. They would arrive in less than 48 hours. Around him, officers worked frantically to coordinate humanity's defense. "Status report," Taeyang commanded. A young officer named Minji Han looked up from her console. "Sir, we've assembled everything we have. 347 combat vessels of various sizes. Every ship that can fight is being armed. We've also mobilized the civilian defense force, mining ships with makeshift weapons. Against their 500 ships," Taeyang said quietly, "what about our technology comparison? Their shields are stronger. Their weapons have longer range. Their armor is more advanced." Minji paused. "Sir, in every simulation we've run, we lose within 3 hours. Then we won't fight the way the simulations predict." Taeyang turned to face his staff. "Send orders to all ship captains. They are to study every battle in human history. I want them to understand how smaller forces have defeated larger ones. I want them to think like pirates, not like naval officers." Captain Ji-hoon Park entered the command center, followed by his crew from the Endeavor. Mina Lee, Hyun Kim, and Yuna Choi had all volunteered to stay and fight. They could have fled to the outer colonies to safety. They chose to stand instead. "Captain Park reporting as ordered, sir," Ji-hoon said, saluting. "Ji-hoon, good. You've seen their ships up close. You've talked to them. What can you tell me that might help?" Ji-hoon thought carefully before speaking. "They're arrogant, sir. They expect us to fight like they do. Organized, formal, following rules of engagement that have existed for millions of years. They can't imagine we might do something different. Different how? They've never had to innovate in warfare. Every battle they've fought has been against species that already accepted their way of thinking. We haven't. We're coming at this with thousands of years of our own military history." Ji-hoon pulled up a holographic display. Their ships are powerful, but they move in tight formations. They rely heavily on their shields, and they hesitate to use their most destructive weapons near populated areas. Hyun Kim, the engineer, stepped forward. Sir, I've been analyzing their shield technology from the sensor data we gathered. I think there might be a way to hurt them. Go on. Their shields are designed to disperse energy weapons and deflect kinetic rounds. But they work by creating a field at a distance from the ship. If we could get inside that field through it somehow, their shields would be useless at point-blank range. How do we get through the shield? Taeyang asked. Hyun smiled grimly. We use something they would never expect. We overload our own fusion reactors and detonate them like bombs. The explosion would be powerful enough to punch through their shields for a split second, long enough for a ship behind us to fire weapons through the gap. Taeyang stared at the engineer. You're talking about suicide runs. Yes, sir. But if each suicide run takes out one of their capital ships, and if we're willing to pay that price, we can even the odds. The command center fell silent. Everyone understood what Hyun was suggesting. Sacrifice plays, trading human lives to kill the enemy. It was brutal, savage, and completely effective. Find volunteers, Taeyang said finally, but only volunteers. I won't order anyone to die. Sir, I'll be the first, Hyun said immediately. It's my plan. I should test it. Denied, Taeyang replied firmly. I need you alive to coordinate the others and fix things when they break. And they will break. The Vrin fleet entered the Earth-Moon system right on schedule. Commander Drek stood on his flagship's bridge, confident and relaxed. The human fleet was waiting for them near the moon, a pathetic collection of small ships against his armada. Open communications, Drek ordered. Let's hear their surrender. Instead, a message came through from Admiral Taeyang. Vrin fleet, you have attacked human civilians without provocation. You have murdered innocents. Leave our system now or face the consequences. Drek laughed so hard his translator struggled to keep up. Consequences from you? Your weapons cannot even penetrate our shields. This will be over in minutes. Then come and finish it, Taeyang said, and cut the connection. The Vrin fleet advanced in their traditional formation, 3 waves of ships in a perfect geometric pattern. It was beautiful, organized, and exactly what they always did. The human fleet scattered like birds, breaking into dozens of small groups. They used the moon's gravity to slingshot around, gaining speed. They hid behind asteroids and debris. They moved in ways that made no tactical sense according to collective doctrine. What are they doing? Drek demanded. Why aren't they forming a defensive line? His tactical officer studied the displays, confusion evident. Unknown, Commander. Their movements are random, chaotic. Then we'll destroy them one by one. All ships fire at will. The Vrin fleet opened fire with their energy weapons. Beams of deadly light lanced through space. Several human ships were hit and exploded. But for every hit, 3 shots missed as the human ships jinked and weaved unpredictably. Then Captain Jihoon, commanding a destroyer squadron, led his ships through an asteroid field that the Vrin were reluctant to enter. The aliens followed, confident their shields could handle any collisions. That's when Hyun's plan began. A small human freighter suddenly accelerated directly at the lead Vrin battleship. The aliens barely noticed it, expecting their shields to deflect it easily. Instead, the freighter detonated its fusion reactor in a massive explosion right against the shield. For exactly 1 second, the shield collapsed. In that second, 3 human destroyers fired every weapon they had through the gap. Missiles, railgun rounds, and laser fire struck the Vrin ship's bare armor. The battleship shuddered, venting atmosphere and debris. Impossible, Drek screamed. Their technology cannot do that. But it was happening again and again. Human ships were ramming themselves into Vrin vessels, sacrificing themselves to create openings for others. It was insane. It was wasteful. It was effective. The Vrin fleet began to falter. They had never faced an enemy willing to die just to hurt them. In collective warfare, preservation of life was paramount. Battles were fought at long range with minimal casualties. This was something else entirely. Mina Lee piloted her fighter through the chaos with incredible skill. She dodged enemy fire, weaved between larger ships, and struck at weak points. When a Vrin destroyer captured a human medical frigate carrying wounded, she made a decision. Yuna, she said over the radio. I'm sorry. Mina, what are you doing? Yuna's voice came back confused. Saving everyone I can. Mina aimed her fighter directly at the destroyer's engines. She ejected every other pilot in her squadron, ordering them to escape pods. Then she rammed her fighter into the Vryn ship at maximum speed. The impact wasn't enough to destroy the destroyer, but it crippled its engines. The wounded human frigate managed to escape while the Vryn ship drifted helplessly. Mina ejected at the last possible second, her pod tumbling through space. Ji-hoon diverted 2 ships to recover her and the other pilots. The Battle of Luna, as it would later be called, raged for 6 hours. The Vryn expected a quick victory. Instead, they found themselves in a grinding, brutal fight against an enemy that refused to die. When Commander Drek finally ordered his fleet to retreat, he had lost 40 ships. Humanity had lost 96. By the numbers, the Vryn won, but they had expected to lose none. In the command center, Admiral Taeyang watched the enemy withdraw. Around him, exhausted officers collapsed at their stations. They had survived, barely. Status? Taeyang asked. Minji Han read from her console, her voice hoarse. We have 251 ships still combat capable. Casualties are over 20,000 dead, 30,000 wounded. Every ship we have is damaged to some degree. And the Vryn? They're regrouping at Jupiter. Intelligence suggests they're calling for reinforcements. Taeyang nodded slowly. They learned we can hurt them. Now they'll come back with everything they have. Ji-hoon stood next to the Admiral, watching the tactical display. Sir, we can't win a second battle like that. We barely won this one, and that was with surprise on our side. I know. Taeyang pulled up a map of the solar system. But we bought time. Time to evacuate civilians. Time to prepare better defenses. And time to send a message to the rest of the collective. What message? That humanity will not go quietly. That we will make every meter of space cost them blood. And that maybe, just maybe, some other species out there will see what we're doing and remember that they don't have to accept oppression either. In orbit, survivors worked to repair what they could. The Vryn fleet gathered at Jupiter, now reinforced with 200 additional ships. The next battle would be larger, deadlier, and possibly final. But in that moment, humanity had proven something important. They could fight. They could hurt the enemy, and they absolutely would not surrender no matter the cost. Word of the battle spread across human space faster than light. In every colony, on every station, people heard how their defenders had stood against impossible odds and survived. Hope, fragile but real, began to grow. The Vryn reported to the collective assembly that humans were more difficult than expected. The collective's response was simple: crush them completely. Send the Armada. 3 weeks after the Battle of Luna, the collective assembly gathered on their ancient homeworld of Corvaxis Prime. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the massive chamber, their various forms creating a bizarre tapestry of galactic life. At the center sat the eldest Corvax, a being so old that some believed it had been alive since the collective's founding, millions of years ago. Its body was mostly mechanical now, the original organic parts having failed over the centuries. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of ages. The human problem must be resolved, Corvax announced. They have demonstrated resistance. Worse, their resistance has been noticed by others. Ambassador Trelvik, the Saltarian who had first contacted humanity, stepped forward. Eldest, they are one species with limited ships. Yes, they fought better than expected, but they cannot stand against our full might. That is not the concern. Corvax's mechanical eyes swept the chamber. Already, we have detected increased unrest among the lower-tier species. The Bulmaki have delayed their tribute payments. The Sethran have requested renegotiation of their treaties. The humans have given them hope. A representative from the crystalline Krillian species spoke up. Then we destroy the humans completely. Glass their planets. Show everyone what happens to those who resist. We will, Corvax agreed. But we will do it properly. The Armada will go. Not a raiding fleet. Not an enforcement fleet. The Armada. We will erase humanity so thoroughly that in 1,000 years no one will remember they existed. The Assembly voted unanimously. The Armada, which had not been fully deployed in 10,000 years, began to mobilize. 5,000 ships, the most powerful vessels in the galaxy, crewed by the finest warriors from 100 species. It was unstoppable. It was overwhelming. It was meant to be the final word on human resistance. On Earth, Admiral Taeyang received the intelligence reports with grim acceptance. 5,000 ships. They're not playing games anymore. We can't fight that many, Ji-hoon said. He had been promoted to Admiral after the Battle of Luna. taking command of the defense fleet while Taeyang coordinated overall strategy. We barely survived against 500. Then we don't fight them. Taeyang pulled up a holographic map. We've been evacuating civilians for weeks now. Every transport we have is moving people to the outer colonies, to stations beyond their immediate reach. We're not going to win this battle, but we can survive it. They'll destroy Earth, Ji-hoon said quietly. Yes, they will, and that will be the greatest tactical mistake they've ever made. Taeyang's eyes were hard. We're going to turn Earth into a trap. We're going to make them pay such a high price for their victory that it breaks something in them. Over the following weeks, a desperate plan took shape. Earth's population was reduced to only essential military personnel. The cities were rigged with hidden weapons platforms. The space stations were converted into bombs. Every ship that couldn't evacuate was turned into a mine, left drifting in precise locations. Hyun Kim worked around the clock with engineers, creating weapons that the collective had never imagined. They weren't elegant or efficient. They were crude, brutal, and effective. Humanity was preparing for the biggest ambush in history. Mina Lee, recovered from her ejection at Luna, trained new pilots in the tactics they had learned. Forget everything you know about proper combat, she told them. We're not fighting honorably. We're fighting to hurt them as badly as possible before we die. Yuna Choi studied every piece of data they had on collective species. She looked for weaknesses, for psychological patterns, for anything that might give humanity an edge. What she found was disturbing. Admiral Taeyang, she reported, I've analyzed 1,000 years of collective history. They haven't had a real war in all that time. They've had suppressions, enforcement actions, police operations, but never a war where both sides were willing to do anything to win. What does that mean for us? It means they're soft. Not weak, but soft. They've forgotten what total war looks like. We haven't. Every generation of humans has known war. It's in our DNA, our culture, our history. We understand it in a way they don't. Taeyang nodded slowly. Then we teach them. The Armada arrived at the Sol system like a dark wave. 5,000 ships, so many that they blotted out the stars. At their head was the eldest Korvax's personal flagship, a vessel the size of a small moon. Korvax itself had come to witness humanity's end. It wanted to see personally what happened to species who forgot their place. The Armada advanced toward Earth, sensors sweeping space. They detected the human fleet but ignored it. 300 ships against 5,000 was not even a fight. They would deal with Earth first, then mop up the survivors. As they entered Earth's orbit, they found cities that appeared abandoned. Their sensors showed no military installations, no weapons, no defenses, just empty buildings and silent streets. This is almost sad, Korvax observed. They ran rather than face us. Perhaps there was wisdom in them after all. The collective fleet began landing occupation forces. Thousands of soldiers descended on major cities to claim them for the collective. They moved through empty streets, confused by the lack of resistance. Then Admiral Taeyang gave the signal. The cities exploded. Every building, every vehicle, every structure had been rigged with explosives. Entire urban centers detonated simultaneously, consuming thousands of collective soldiers in an instant. The space stations that had seemed abandoned suddenly came to life, revealing themselves as massive weapons platforms. They opened fire at point-blank range into the collective fleet. Human ships that had been drifting, apparently disabled, suddenly activated. They were automated bombs, guided by AI, and they rammed into collective vessels with devastating effect. The moon itself opened up, revealing hidden missile silos that launched thousands of nuclear warheads into the collective fleet. And from behind Earth, where they had been hiding in the planet's shadow, the human fleet emerged. They didn't attack in formation or with any sense of organization. They simply charged, every ship firing every weapon, targeting engines and command centers, going for maximum damage. The Armada was stunned. They had expected surrender or a brief, futile fight. Instead, they found themselves in a chaotic hell where nothing made sense and death came from every direction. Ji-hoon led his ships directly at Korvax's flagship. All ships target the big one. If we're going to die, let's make sure we take their leader with us. Dozens of human ships focused their fire on the massive vessel. Its shields held, but the constant bombardment weakened them. Hyun's suicide ship slammed into the shields, creating gaps. Missiles poured through. The flagship shuddered under the assault. Inside his ship, Korvax experienced something it had not felt in millions of years: fear. These humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to hurt the collective as badly as possible before they died. It was madness. All ships fall back, Korvax ordered. Reform outside the orbit of Mars. We need to reassess. But falling back proved difficult. The human fleet pursued like wolves, harrying the collective ships, forcing them to fight as they retreated. More vessels fell. More soldiers died. When the collective finally regrouped at Mars, they took stock of their losses. 700 ships destroyed or disabled, hundreds of thousands of soldiers dead, and Earth, while heavily damaged, was still intact because the collective had retreated before they could complete its destruction. Korvax stared at the tactical display in shock. In one battle, humans had dealt more damage to the collective than any enemy in 10,000 years, and they had done it while being outnumbered 15-1. How? It whispered. How is this possible? Jehoon's fleet had also taken massive casualties. Only 73 ships remained combat-capable, but they had proven their point. The collective could be hurt. The collective could bleed. In the command center on Mars's underground base, Admiral Taeyang reviewed the battle results. They had lost, technically. Earth was devastated, millions dead, their fleet shattered. But they had survived, and more importantly, they had shown the galaxy that the collective was not invincible. Admiral, Minji-Han reported, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Encrypted messages from species within the collective. They're asking how we did it. They want to know how we fought back. Taeyang felt a cold smile cross his face. Send them everything. Our tactics, our strategies, our willingness to sacrifice. Let every oppressed species in the collective know that resistance is possible. On the collective flagship, Korvax made a decision. We will destroy the humans completely. Use the Star Killer weapons. Destroy their sun. End them. Ambassador Trelvik stepped forward hesitantly. Eldest, that will also destroy their inner planets and kill any collective forces still in the system. The cost is enormous. The cost of letting them survive is greater. Korvax's mechanical body shook with rage. They have infected the collective with the virus of rebellion. They must be purged before it spreads. But even as Korvax gave the order, it knew something fundamental had changed. Humanity had shown the galaxy that the strong could be challenged by the determined, that technology could be overcome by will, that the impossible was only impossible until someone did it anyway. The battle for Earth was over. But the war for the galaxy's future had just begun. And in that war, the eldest Korvax's order to destroy Earth's sun never came to pass. Before the Star Killer weapons could be deployed, something unprecedented happened. The Bolmaki, a species that had served the collective for 3,000 years, refused the order to transport the weapons. We will not participate in genocide, their representative declared in an emergency transmission. The humans fought for their freedom. That is not a crime worthy of extinction. Within hours, 6 more species announced they would not assist in the sun's destruction. The collective assembly descended into chaos. Arguments broke out between the elder species who wanted to make an example of humanity and the younger ones who secretly admired what humans had done. Korvax realized with horror that the collective was fracturing. The unity that had held for millions of years was cracking, and it was all because of one stubborn species that refused to accept their place. On Mars, Admiral Taeyang watched these developments with careful attention. They're afraid, he said to Jehoon. Not of our weapons or our ships. They're afraid of our ideas. Ideas can't fight wars, Jehoon replied, though he sounded uncertain. Ideas win wars, Taeyang corrected. Weapons just decide who dies along the way. The human fleet had retreated to the outer colonies, regrouping and rebuilding. They had 73 combat-capable ships from the original 300. It was a devastating loss, but survivors were already building more. The colonies, far from collective reach, had become humanity's new stronghold. Lieutenant Minji-Han, now promoted to commander, discovered something crucial in the captured collective data. Admiral, look at this. The collective's entire structure is built on the assumption that everyone accepts the hierarchy. Their logistics, their communications, their military doctrine, it all assumes cooperation. And if species stop cooperating, the whole thing could collapse. They have millions of ships spread across the galaxy, but they're designed to suppress local resistance, not fight a coordinated rebellion. Yuna Choi, studying the psychology of collective species, added her findings. Every species in the collective became peaceful before they reached space. They evolved past their aggressive phases naturally. That's why they don't understand us. We brought our capacity for violence with us to the stars. That's not something to be proud of, Mina Lee said quietly. She had lost many friends in the battles and the cost weighed heavily on her. Maybe not, Taeyang agreed, but it's what makes us survivors. And right now the galaxy needs survivors who know how to fight. The Admiral made a decision. Instead of waiting for the collective to attack again, humanity would go on the offensive. But not with weapons, with information. Over the following months, human agents began making contact with oppressed species across the galaxy. They shared their tactical knowledge, their strategies, their willingness to sacrifice for freedom. They asked for nothing in return except that these species consider whether their place in the collective was truly as natural as they had been told. The response was extraordinary. Species that had served the collective for thousands of years began quietly building their own defensive fleets. They started questioning tribute payments and treaty obligations. Some even began small acts of resistance. The collective assembly met in emergency session after emergency session. Korvax, growing desperate, ordered enforcement fleets to suppress the growing unrest. But the fleets were spread too thin. There were too many systems, too many species, and not enough ships to police them all. Commander Drek, the Vryn officer who had first attacked Titan Station, found himself ordered to suppress a rebellion on a world called Sethris. When he arrived, he found the local species armed with improvised weapons and using tactics that looked suspiciously human. The battle was brutal. The Sethrin fought with a desperation that the Vryn had only ever seen from humans. When Drek finally crushed the rebellion, he had lost 30 ships doing it. 30 ships to defeat one planet's resistance, he reported to Korvax, confusion and concern in his voice. Eldest, they're learning from the humans. All of them. Every species that resists uses human tactics now.
How do we fight this?
We destroy the source, Korvax replied. We end humanity once and for all. But humanity was no longer in one place. They had spread across dozens of systems, hidden colonies and stations that moved constantly, always staying ahead of collective patrols. They had become ghosts, appearing to raid a supply convoy or free enslaved workers, then vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. 5 years passed. The collective grew weaker with each passing month. Species were openly defying orders now. Some had declared independence, daring the collective to try and stop them. The Armada, once invincible, was now scattered across the galaxy trying to hold together an empire that was falling apart. Humanity, meanwhile, had grown stronger. Their fleet numbered over 1,000 ships now, built in hidden shipyards by species who had joined their cause. They were no longer fighting alone. The eldest Korvax, watching its empire crumble, finally requested a meeting with humanity's leaders. The message was simple. We must talk. The meeting was held aboard a neutral ship in deep space far from any planets or stations. Korvax arrived with a small escort. Admiral Taeyang came with just 2 ships, one commanded by Jihoon, the other by Mina. Inside the meeting chamber, Korvax and Taeyang faced each other. The ancient being looked tired, its mechanical body showing signs of wear that had never been there before. You have destroyed the collective, Korvax said without preamble. Millions of years of peace and order, gone because of your species' refusal to accept reality. The reality we refused to accept was slavery, Taeyang replied calmly. And we didn't destroy the collective. You did the moment you built an empire on oppression. We brought stability to the galaxy. We ended the chaos of constant warfare by enslaving everyone who couldn't fight back. That's not peace. That's just forcing everyone to be quiet while you stand on their throats. Korvax was silent for a long moment. What do you want? Complete destruction of the collective? Revenge for your people? No, Taeyang said and saw surprise in Korvax's mechanical eyes. We want a new galaxy. One where species are equal, regardless of their strength. One where cooperation is voluntary, not enforced. One where freedom matters more than order. Impossible. The strong will always dominate the weak. That is the nature of existence. No, Taeyang leaned forward. That's the nature of existence when the strong never face consequences. We showed the galaxy what happens when the weak refuse to stay weak, when they fight back regardless of the cost, when they value freedom more than safety. Korvax was quiet for a long time. Finally it said, if I agree to your terms, If we dissolve the collective hierarchy and create this new order you speak of, what guarantee do I have that your species won't simply replace us as the dominant power? Taeyang smiled grimly. Because we don't want to dominate anyone. We just want to be left alone to live our lives. We'll help any species that wants to resist oppression, but we have no interest in ruling others. Why should I believe that? Because if we wanted to rule, we could have kept what we learned to ourselves. Instead, we gave every species in the galaxy the knowledge to fight back. We made ourselves unnecessary as protectors. That's not what conquerors do. The negotiations took weeks. In the end, the Galactic Collective agreed to dissolve its enforcement hierarchy. A new organization would form, one based on mutual cooperation and voluntary membership. Species would be equal partners regardless of their technology or military strength. The treaty was signed aboard the Endeavour, the ship that had first made contact with the collective 5 years earlier. Representatives from hundreds of species attended, including many who had fought for their freedom inspired by humanity's example. Ambassador Trelvik, the Soltharian who had originally dismissed humans as primitive, approached Admiral Taeyang during the ceremony. I was wrong about your species, he admitted. I thought you were weak because you lacked our technology. I didn't understand that strength comes in many forms. We're not special, Taeyang replied. We just refuse to accept that might makes right. Any species could have done the same, Brandwine, but they didn't. You did. That makes you special, whether you admit it or not. The galaxy changed after that day. The former collective species began rebuilding their societies as free peoples. Some struggled with the transition, having known only hierarchy for so long, but others flourished, discovering creativity and growth that had been suppressed for millennia. Humanity returned to Earth and began the long work of rebuilding. The planet was scarred, its cities in ruins, but it was still home. And now it was truly free. 10 years after the signing of the treaty, Captain Jihoon Park stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, now a symbol of peace rather than war. With him were Mina, Hyun, and Yuna, his crew who had been with him from the beginning. Do you think it will last? Mina asked, looking at the stars. The new order? Nothing lasts forever, Jihoon replied. But maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe it just has to last long enough for people to remember that they have a choice, that they can say no to oppression. That freedom is always worth fighting for, Yuna smiled. We taught the galaxy that the strong aren't invincible. That's a lesson that won't be forgotten, Hyun added. And we showed them that sometimes the smallest,